Hello, Martin. Welcome to episode 90 of Illuminating Rounds. How you been?
Very well, thanks, Dave. Yeah. Off on holiday on Saturday.
Okay, tell us more.
So it's not very often I get to go away. I'm taking my kids away to Cornwall, right on the border with Devon, in the Tamar Valley, separates the two counties, with my dad, with their grandfather.
Nice. So that's an unusual trip, isn't it? Three generations all going together.
Yeah, I think we've only once ever done it before. We spent a couple of nights on a boat on the Norfolk Broads with him once, and his wife that passed away recently. But it's got a whole week. I'm a bit nervous actually. I'm not quite sure what we're going to do with him because, like I said to him, there's a really nice walk, a couple of miles to a waterfall, and he's like 85. He said, "Oh, I don't know. I don't think I can walk as far as that." So I thought that was a relatively modest walk. So
right.
We'll see. I think the thing is we'll chill out. There's a pool. It's a heated outdoor pool. There's an indoor pool. There's a spa. We can chill out a lot.
Nice.
Go and see a castle, that sort of stuff. It'd be nice.
Very nice. My mum recently went to see my sister in America, and she's doing well. She's like sort of 76, 77, and you think she's doing really well to get out to America on her own. And then you hear that actually she kind of arrived in the airport. They put her in a wheelchair and pushed her around. And then she got in the airplane. They sat down. The other side, they put her back in a wheelchair. But she said she got to my mum. My sister said she got there, and my mum was like, "Right, okay, we've got to clean out your garage now." My sister's like, "Okay, all right, come on then. Well, get me a chair." She sat and watched her.
Do you know my Welsh grandfather didn't leave the UK until he was in his 70s? And he left the UK because he won the world marathon championships for over 65s or something.
Wow.
And Virgin Atlantic paid for him to go to Canada, Toronto, to sort of like see if he could retain the title that year.
Yeah.
And he said he was really nervous. He went on his own. He was terrified landing in Toronto. And he went to the reception desk, and the woman he asked directions from spoke Welsh. And
wow.
He's a native Welsh speaker. He said within 5 minutes he felt completely at home in Toronto after that. Once he'd spoken Welsh to someone, he felt happy. And I don't think he found anybody else.
I was going to say, who knew you had to go halfway around the world before you found another Welsh speaker?
Well, no, where he lives, everyone speaks Welsh.
I'm sure they do.
They do. You. It's quite rare to find someone who only speaks English in the part of Wales that my family come from. Yeah.
Right.
They're all bilingual, of course. They're bilingual, but you can't get by in modern Britain without a little bit of English, can you?
Excellent. Right. Okay. What are we going to do today? We're going to talk about our scenario that we played from St Mère Église, a tough start to our drop zone career. I think it's
Seldom Practical, it was called. Wasn't it?
Seldom Practical. And we're going to talk about dice and dice towers. First thing I want to do though is talk about and thank obviously the patrons, and we appreciate all your patronage. But what I want to do is because I was at the tournament a couple of weeks ago and was talking to a couple of patrons, and they hadn't realised some of the benefits you get. So one of the key things I want to show you guys on my my browser right now is on the Scenario Archive. If you are a patron, you can come along to my page here, and you will see. Why are we going so slow? Okay, so you'll see here that you can enable the counter graphics here. You'll see it's a patron-only option, and you can still tick it if you're not a patron, but it won't do anything. Only if you're a patron will you be able to tick it and actually see something. And at that point, the idea is you can view any scenario, and we'll just pick a random scenario here. And thanks to the good work of all sorts of people who volunteer to help out, you can start to see the vehicle graphics and the ordnance graphics from Vassal for each of the scenarios. And not only that, you can also hover over and you'll see not only the vehicle notes, but the vehicle numbers as well. So for those that have their vehicles stored in vehicle note order or anything like that, you can grab that. And that's particularly useful for me because I think, sometimes where I'm struggling to see some of the graphics on the scanned scenario cards for in a tournament, or for example, something like that, it's a great way to grab the vehicle numbers. Now, I will say that obviously the scenario card takes precedence. So sometimes, for example, the anti-aircraft machine gun configuration might be different on the scenario card. So I haven't gone to that extent of double checking that every one of these vehicles is the correct vehicle from the main for the machine gun aspect, but in general these are the correct vehicles. So, and obviously if you find a problem or an issue with it, then just let us know. But that's there.
I think we've said before how sometimes it'd be quite nice to have that on the official scenario card, actually, wouldn't it? Because it can be a pain identifying vehicles.
Exactly.
Sometimes.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So that's something to look out for if you are a patron. And again, thanks very much for all your support. We appreciate it. And don't be worried if you become a patron and that's not there immediately. I have to spot that you become a patron, then I add you to a list on the archive website. So if for example you do that and you don't see the graphics, by all means ping me an email, because we don't get necessary notifications immediately about new patrons. We have to go and look for them, but I can always add you instantly once you come on. So I appreciate anybody that does do that. Obviously all the funds go towards hosting the archive and going towards things like our giveaways and stuff like that. So we appreciate your support. Right, Martin, shall we do our scenario, or should we have a conversation about dice?
I think we should talk about dice.
Okay, dice. So in our recent tournament that we went to, I was playing nice guy, Joe Arthur. Joe's a very nice guy, a real gentleman. And Joe asked me at the start of the game if I wouldn't mind rolling dice in a dice cup into the dice tower. And I kind of smiled and was like, well, doesn't seem like it's needed. The dice tower's random enough. And he was saying, well, okay, he'd had a bad experience, and so he wanted to be fair to everybody he asked going forward. And he was, doing the right thing, if you like. He wasn't trying to be difficult or anything like that. In saying, look, he felt that one player he'd played had deliberately tried to stack the dice as he was putting it into the dice tower. And that's an incredulous story in of itself, isn't it, really, that someone would do that? And that was the first thing I want to talk to you about is, have you ever come across anybody do that, and what would you do if someone was doing that? And then we'll get on to the fact that I wanted to try and prove to Joe that actually it's impossible to do that. So first things first, Martin, have you had any problems with people rolling dice against you?
I don't think so. I don't think that I've ever been conscious that somebody was deliberately trying to stack the dice, as you say, to try and make them land in a certain way. I think it would be very, very difficult to do, and secondly, it would be ridiculously pointless, isn't it? Do you're playing a game and you can kind of go away and go, yes, I got all those really low rolls.
Right.
It's like, what does that mean? What does that actually say about yourself? Like, I can understand a kid doing it. I can't understand an adult doing it. In terms of what would I do if I thought that was happening? I think I'm not sure. I think one or two things. I'd either play through the game politely and never play that individual again if I was sure that that's what they were doing. I think if it was really extreme, resign the game.
Wow.
Just walk away. Just go, right. Yeah, because I'm not going to accuse somebody of that, because it's so easy to deny it, isn't it?
Right.
But I think that is the more extreme thing. Yeah.
So I went about trying to set out to prove whether or not this was actually possible to do.
Yeah.
And so you'll see now a video down on the bottom there of I constructed a little machine with my Arduino board. If you're into any kind of electronics or motors or anything like that, the Arduino boards are amazing. You can get a starter kit. I don't know, it's $50, $60, something like that. And you basically get a board which gives you the ability to code some electronics, and then you get some wires, and you get a whole bunch of gadgets. You get motors, and you get LEDs and light sensors and temperature sensors and all sorts of things. And one of the things you get is a servo. So I didn't even know what a servo was. So just in case you're as clueless as I am about this kind of stuff. So servos are basically kind of like a motor, but that you can set to a particular degree, so a particular angle. So I built a dice roller that effectively did this and did the same dice roll each time to drop into a dice tower to see the results. And then I wrote a small program that would just let me record 100 dice rolls and give me the average and the totals of each dice roll. So the first thing to do, and as you'll see on the videos right now, is make sure that the dice is a fair dice. So before we do anything, I rolled the dice 100 times and I did it twice to give me an idea that, okay, make sure that the dice are fair. Now, Joe's concern around this was not necessarily that people could get the number that they always wanted, but he felt like maybe you could skew the bell curve a little bit. And it's hard to be able to demonstrate this if you're just looking at averages, because let's say, for example, I skew the curve to avoid sixes and to avoid ones, for example. But if I look at the average dice rolls, it will still be 3.5. If I just roll threes and fours on one dice non-stop, my average will be 3.5. And if you look at a fair dice, that also should be 3.5. So you have to look at not only the average, but also the frequency of the numbers that come up. So the first thing I did after doing the fair dice was to test, and you'll see it now on the screen, basically the dice being dropped into it via a rocker into the dice tower. Yeah. And the key thing I think I noticed here was that the dice doesn't land in the same position on the dice tower every time. It's completely random. Sometimes the dice jump out of the tower, which in theory can't happen if you're doing it exactly the same way every time. And this is as close as I can get. Now, obviously, there are small changes in the the thing. The motor gets warmer. Every now and again the little rocker gets knocked, and it might be a millimeter or so different. But it's no real difference to what someone might be doing if they were trying to stack it, in a particular place in the dice tower. They're not going to get it anywhere near as close as what I did here. So I did that with the dice rocker.
Because it seems to me that just having them in your hand, however you're holding them, presents a far greater degree of randomness than dropping them in from that little thing that you've got there.
Yeah, exactly.
So you really removed a huge amount of the obvious randomness.
I think so.
Dice. Yeah.
So we talked about this, and like I say, I will show you the averages, but it really was different. So then Joe said, okay, well, so if you look at now the one that's on the video now, he said, well, maybe take a look at pushing a dice off the ledge. Yeah. So as you know, like the dice has got like a ledge around the top, and what it did then was change the servo to flick the dice off the top. And I put almost like a baffle on the top of the dice tower, so that the dice in theory was in the same position every time. And obviously, I put in all the experiments, I put the dice in the same facing to make sure that it was as fair a test as possible. So same facing up, same facing outwards, same in everywhere. Yeah. And so that was the kind of the second test. I also tried to test dropping a dice. I think I've already seen this shown you on the video, but I tried dropping a dice with my hand and the same face, to see, to kind of replicate if for example you could do this. And the last one that I also tried after the flick, which again, to me looks fairly random. What I was nervous about with the flick, and the last test I did as well, which I'll talk about in a second, was that if you're flicking a dice down and it's sliding down the baffles, I wondered whether or not the two sides of the dice on the edge, like if you imagine the dice front and forward, the two sides, maybe those wouldn't come up as much because the dice was rolling downwards rather than. So I thought, well, maybe that's a way of trying to, if for example, I don't know, let's say for example you're going for smoke, and getting a number one would be great, but actually avoiding a six is really, really important because you want to still be moving. Maybe there's a way of rolling dice to generate that kind of like making sure that you avoid a six, and you might get but the problem is
it's only tumbling in like one way.
Exactly. Yeah.
So the plane the six is on is always to the left.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. And I thought
what concerns me about randomness with dice. Yeah.
That's right. The trouble is with that, in terms of like from a gaming point of view, and this isn't really necessarily important because it's more about whether you can stack the dice, but is if you're trying to roll that to avoid a six, you're also going to avoid the one, which is probably the number you needed to get smoked. Now, obviously,
Sure.
assault engineers and all this kind of stuff, have a lot better chance with 2s and 3s. So actually, if you just forego your 1 on the fact that you're forgoing a 6, maybe that's a good deal. So there is that kind of issue. But I still felt like it was a little bit too it was a little bit too it's not consistent enough with the flicking off. So the last experiment I tried was to place the dice on the side of the baffle as it slides down. So as my dice tower is, I don't know about yours, but I've got a drop, and then there's a baffle that almost sometimes gets missed. The baffle is on the other side it's like on the front side. So I placed the dice on the front of the dice tower and tried to let them slide down. But I noticed even dropping the dice, like, having them stacked and then dropping them, you can't guarantee which finger or thumb lets go of the dice last. You kind of let go of it. And it's quite extreme whether or not, if your thumb lets go, it spins one way, and if your dice, if your finger lets go of the dice, it spins the other way. So I wasn't happy with the fact that I couldn't get it to be as cleanly dropped. So what I then did was took a piece of Lego, but the smooth side of a Lego, and placed the dice in the same position every time, and moved it away quickly so that just the kind of the inertia or the gravity took the dice down, rather than me injecting any kind of effort into the dice to see how that would do. So I did those rolls as well. Now, I'll show you the results in a minute. I'm just going to let the kind of the video kind of show out to show you, exactly what kind of happened. But I did start to. It's quite interesting because I started thinking, okay, well, maybe I'll find a way that gives me, a number that's more useful. Yeah. And the trouble is that you are right 1/6 of the time. And this is what I was saying to Joe, in that, if Joe worries about people cheating him, 20% of all games, I think, in ASL, and that's my finger in the air, are decided quite heavily by dice. So I mean, it might be higher than that, but I'm just going to say 20%. So if 20% of games are decided by dice, and you believe that players are trying to cheat you, well, 10% or half of the 20%, so 10% of those games, in theory, are going to go against you. So if you think that let's say, for example, you take the extreme position that every opponent is cheating you, 10% of the time that you play, you're going to be proved right. You're going to see these dice go really low.
Right, yeah.
And you're going to feel like you were cheated. And it was a little bit like that with me trying to think, for example, there's a few times where I was thinking, 4s are coming up quite a lot. I hope, because I wanted this to be, although I wanted it to be a fair test, I didn't want to find out that I could stack the dice. I kind of wanted the dice towers to be accurate. And when I started getting a lot of 4s, I started worrying, thinking, this is maybe there is something in it. But 1/6 of the time, in theory, we're going to get 4s. So it's really hard to kind of like spot it and to figure it out.
Absolutely, yeah. There must be, like, places like casinos must have had like proper, careful, thorough investigations of things like this, because they might as well be really, really honest that the dice are right, because they've already fixed the game with maths, haven't they? So they say they might as well draw everyone's attention to the fact that the game is completely fair. In some other respect, it must be. I wonder if it's worth Googling it sometime.
Well, okay, so if you go to craps websites, they will talk a lot about the idea that people can try to roll in particular ways, and they absolutely talk about how you hold the dice in a particular way, and how you have to try and roll it, throw, because you've got to hit the back of in theory you have to hit the back. So what they try to do is they try to throw the dice in such a way that the dice land flat and then bounce straight off the back of the board. And the back of the board is all like pyramid-y kind of, it's not designed
to help randomize these dice.
Yeah, right.
So do they think that they can do that? Do they think they can succeed in?
Yeah, I think some craps players do. But the thing is, I think this is a little bit like that game that the casino plays, where it would love you to think that you have an advantage, because you really haven't. And even if you have, maybe you get a 2% advantage. But craps is a game that maybe has I don't know what the edge is, but maybe it's a 5% edge for the house. Yeah. So it's a bit like counting cards. Well, I know counting cards in theory gives you a theoretical edge over the house in blackjack, but if you don't do that 100% correctly, you're not doing it. And the thing about blackjack, I think, is that the casino's bankroll is bigger than yours, so they can go through longer streaks of luck than you can.
That's right, yeah.
And that's generally how they win these games.
Which is why the doubling every time you lose doesn't work, isn't it?
That's exactly right.
Because
in theory it does work if you can keep affording to double up, but exactly. So I looked at this. Okay, so I'm going to show you now. So if you take a look at the graph that we talked about, and I'll put it up on the screen for you as well. These numbers. So I put up so you can see there's 12 bar charts there of the various things. So these are the results of the various tests that I did, along with some computer averages as well. So I used a computer program to generate 100 random numbers from 1 to 6 as well, to try and show, like, we have to assume that a computer's random number generator is accurate. And again, so I've got my dice rolling where I was trying to be fair. I've got my dice dropping where I was trying to be unfair. I've got my dice flicking off the top, and I've got my dice being slid down the bevels. So I guess the question for you is, like, looking at those, do any of those stand out? Now, you've got to imagine you're playing a game of ASL and you are watching the dice kind of being rolled. So, for example, like, there's one on the right-hand side, the second from the down, didn't roll very many 6s. And the very bottom left chart shows that we didn't roll a lot of 2s on that particular test. So those to me are the ones that sort of stood out a little bit. The bottom right, not very many 3s. On average, we should be seeing sort of 16, 17 of each number that comes up on the dice in 100 dice rolls. And the lowest on any of these tests was about 7, and the highest was about 22, 23, something like that. So I'll tell you now which ones they were. So along the bottom is the computer generated ones. So we've seen there. So again, you can think of it as.
So you say computer generated? Do you mean like the Vassal?
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't Vassal, but I used a random number generator to do 100 dice. And so you can see that in theory, and we're going to have to assume that that is a random value. That is what it is. I mean, that's the challenge of it. We've got the next one that's kind of interesting to look at is the one that I rolled it naturally. That natural roll, and that's the top 2 on the left hand side. So the grey background. So there's my natural rolls. So in theory, these are just me, kind of taking the dice, picking it up in any face, dropping it down the dice tower. And again, you saw that 3 didn't come up a lot. You might look at that and go, if that had been, for example, one of the tests in the machine drop, then I might have been more kind of concerned. But again, I did it twice, and you could say, well, the 3s didn't come up a lot, but I know that was as natural as I could get it. I mean, that was unless the dice is in particularly weighted against the number 3, that is that dice. The kind of orangey pinky salmon kind of color in the middle was the machine drop. So that was the one where the machine is just dropping dice down. The one on the right hand side at the top is the flicking, the machine flicking off. The green one is me trying to drop it deliberately, so I was in a particular position.
So you're trying to cheat there, sort of?
Yes, I was literally trying to drop it in a particular place. And then the slide where I was sliding the dice down, and I thought this would be the most biased. I thought this would be if there was going to, and I think Joe suggested this might be as well. I mean, you could argue that the number 2 didn't come up very much on that one, but it wasn't particularly, terrible. I mean, it was, and it's worth noting that on that one where the number 1 was facing up, the number 5 and the number 2s were the 2 edges. So we talked about the ones that if it's only spinning on one, the 2s. So
those are the ones we shouldn't be seeing if it was rolling without.
And what's interesting on both of those is that in theory, there's no reason why the right hand side would land more times than the left hand side, unless the dice tower was somehow
Sure.
warped or whatever. But you were seeing that, combined, the 5 and 2, they were, on average, they were fine.
Yeah.
But there was nothing unusual necessarily about it. I think if to show that was particularly biased, I'd really want to see, for example, the 3.24, the one on the right hand side at the top, that number 6 being so low on both tests, for example, and then we might think, okay, well, that was perhaps worthy of a bit more investigation.
Yeah.
But my take on it was really you couldn't, and this is, again, we've got to stress, if we're doing machine drops and if we're doing, sliding with a piece of Lego off an exact position with the exact same face 100 times, and we're not seeing anywhere near what I would consider to be a skewed result, I've got to think that we haven't got to worry about it. But what was interesting then, I started thinking was, well, you know what? Why couldn't we have the dice element be part of the skill of the game? And I think sometimes we get a bit frustrated. I get a bit frustrated where we put a lot of skill emphasis into ASL, and it's often decided by dice. And we've had it, both of us, each way, where we've played. We've made great moves in ASL, and we haven't been rewarded for it. The dice have let us down, or whatever, or the opponent's dice have done really well and got away with something. Whatever it might be. You've spotted a great line of sight with your 9.2 and your heavy machine gun, and suddenly, double 6 and the machine gun's out, and there's no justice, if you like. If there was an element of skill, and I was thinking about this like in terms of like it was snooker or curling or something like that, where people take great care in, and you imagine like kind of the, I need a 2 here, and I've got to place the dice in a particular way. Now, if we assumed you've always got to use the dice tower still, there's a rule that says you can't just flick it strangely into the dice cup or something. Wouldn't that be a little bit like trying to alleviate the randomness? Now, we might say cheating, and I would agree that it feels
it's cheating as the rules stand, definitely, yeah.
Yeah. You're such a harsh...
But you're saying it would be an interesting change. That's what you're...
Yeah, to introduce the skill element of rolling dice, which I get it.
Because we talked about this the other day, we were saying it's almost like a sport, isn't it? It's may not be aerobic, but it's a kind of it's like darts or something. I think that changes the nature of the game, doesn't it?
But wouldn't it be interesting then, if, for example, some guy that has never, or lady that had never played ASL before, just knew a rudimentary knowledge, but was a really good dice roller, just turned up like with a pack of dice. They were balanced, no one's suggesting they're not balanced.
Sure, yeah.
In a dice tower, no one suggests that dice tower is anything other than like a perfect, but had a method of being able to get 80% of what they needed. They'd be a really good player.
It would change the game into something that isn't what appealed to me about it originally. Put it that way. Can you imagine everybody sitting there practicing rolling their dice and getting there? And that's not, whereas you go to a tournament, everyone's reading the rule book, aren't they, or whatever. So I think, it wouldn't be the kind of game that would appeal to me so much, I think.
But the articles in the journal would say things like, you need those 1s and 2s. Try this method for rolling, and it's the underarm flick or whatever.
Yeah,
I would love it.
Wrist action.
Because the thing is, the frustrating thing about it for me is sometimes the game is taken out of our hands, and that's if you feel like you have a little bit of agency in that dice roll.
You see, I kind of like that element of the game. Actually, you'll see a little bit of that in Seldom Practical, won't we? I like that element of the game, and I think that's what gives the game some of its tension. Of course, the tension wouldn't go because you wouldn't be able to reliably roll what you wanted, but the tension comes from the fact that you've got a good plan, but you still don't know whether it's going to work, or you're really on a back foot, you're really in trouble, but you still might be okay. Do you know what I mean? So that creates that tension, which I think is one of the things I like about the game.
Okay, so you're in the final of the next tournament that you're at, and it comes down to a guy's trying to get off, one squad off the board. You've taken a shot. You've got a normal morale check. It's a 7 morale, German.
He passes that morale check and he wins. If he fails it,
he says, "Oh, this is really important. Hope you don't mind, but I've got a superstitious way of rolling to try and do it." And he rolls in a particular fashion, like a kind of flourish.
Yeah.
And it comes up, he rolls a 4 and he passes.
So that's just superstition, isn't it?
Well, I don't know, just because I said it was superstitious, but it might be.
No. So if you say, look, I'm gonna wear my lucky underpants on my head and I'm gonna roll the dice. Okay. Yeah. I know, and really he knows that makes no difference. Yeah, that's right. If instead of that he does what sort of Joe Arthur was sort of worried about, he's got the dice tower here and he carefully puts them with the 3 facing up or whatever. I think I'd object to that. I mean, even though your experiment is showing me that it's still probably pretty random. Yeah, actually, you're challenging me a little bit, because even though he's deliberately trying to do it, we now kind of know it won't work.
Yeah.
It's still random.
And there is like fine lines. So, for example, I've got a lucky superstition. I always put the dice 4 and a 5 here, and then I give it a kind of like flourish.
Yeah. And if it doesn't make the right noise, I roll them again.
Well, this is the problem, isn't it? Like, that was my practice run. That was the practice run. Can you imagine if we played ASL as kids? Like, no, that one didn't count.
The thing is that the situation matters, because obviously you want to win the tournament, so it matters on those dice. But to me, the game is that's random, and that should be random. And it also, I feel like that's a really, really good game. And it almost, because it's the final of the tournament, it does matter, but it almost doesn't matter whether he rolls low and wins the game or rolls high, whatever. We fought each other to a last dice roll, and that's what decided the game, which means, we both played each other as well as we, really, really well. It's a really, really close game. Yeah, with a tournament, it's slightly different, because it would be nice for him to roll low and actually win the tournament. I think any other situation, it doesn't matter.
Can you imagine a football game going to penalties, and on the last penalty being taken, they say, wait a minute, we're just going to go and phone Bob over in Argentina, who's going to roll a dice for us. It's very fair dice to decide this game.
Well, they did, didn't they? Until recently, the World Cup could be decided on the toss of a coin.
Coin toss, and not only that, there was games decided like important. I think it was like there was a final, or it was a qualifying thing to get into the next round. And the 2 captains went into the dressing room with the referee. They tossed a coin, and then the player had to come out and announce to the crowd they'd lost. I mean, can you imagine anything more anticlimactic? Wow. Okay. All right. So that's that. I think the last point it's going to make is that if our arch enemy who rolls the dice in a particular way, if he needed the 7 and it comes up an 8, you don't care. You smile about it and you go, it's never going to happen.
What an idiot. Yeah.
If it comes up a 6 or anything like that, we're furious, aren't we?
Yeah. Well, you're wondering, maybe he did a quick one then.
So could you get into like someone's head, like a bit of mind games, by being like, oh, actually, this is the way to do it. I'm going to use my lucky dice here, which we know are not fixed. But just use it on key rolls, and you roll them. And you say, by the way, you can use these dice anytime you want. There's no problem. I don't have a problem with it at all. But I'm going to switch these lucky dice for this roll. Half the time, assuming it's a fair 50-50 roll you need, it's going to work.
Yes, that's true.
It will infuriate people.
Is this just moving into poor sportsmanship rather than gamesmanship here? I mean, people talk about psyching their opponents out. They talk about sort of, showing an air of confidence so that they kind of go, do you know what? This guy must be better than me. Somewhere between that and what you're talking about is the difference between gamesmanship and sportsmanship, isn't there? I'm not quite sure where that line is drawn.
Right. Yeah.
But it'd be quite annoying. I think somebody literally changing their dice, making a point of it. I'm going to change these. It's an important shot. I'm going to use my lucky dice. I'd be very irritated.
Oh, it's a game fraught with difficulties, isn't it?
The thing is, before I played ASL and met other ASL players, it never occurred to me that rolling a dice would be anything other than completely random, unless it had been carefully manufactured to be that. I think you could potentially just roll it like carefully onto the table and have a little bit of control over how it landed.
Yep.
Other than that, I think dropping it into a tower, I think it's just random, and I'm going to stop worrying about it because I'm a little bit sensitive to this because I have a reputation for being lucky with dice.
Yeah,
and I mean, lucky in life in lots of respects as well. But so I've become a little bit paranoid about it, and I'm sure that the dice that I roll are as fair as anybody else's.
Right, and you're exactly that. The funny thing about you is you go away from dicing me with real dice, and then we get a vassal, and you can't roll more than a 5. You're like, it's amazing.
We might see a bit of that today.
We might do, but the thing about it is, I think because it's like the confirmation bias. We don't comment when you roll an 11. We don't comment when you roll a 10.
Yeah.
We roll our eyes.
And I draw attention to it myself. Yeah.
And that's the thing. So I think we can all do a better job of looking out for our better rolls and trying to ignore our higher rolls and actually just appreciate our good rolls when we get them, I think is probably what we need to be doing. Right. So moving on there, Martin. Let's look at Seldom Practical. What's going on?
So are we looking at it?
Yeah.
It's there, yeah. Okay. So this is Bockich. And we have got a German force defending, and the Americans set up in quite a tight little corner. You have got the option, I think, of setting up a bit further down.
That's right, down to C, the hex row C,
down
which
to
is
C, yeah.
Oh, sorry, sevens, I think, down to
yes, yeah. And you can see that the edge of the board is marked in red, and the Americans win this by simply having a multi-man counter in good order on that hill at the end of the game, and that's it. That's all the Americans have to do. Half squad will do just good order on the hill, and they win. There is, unless the Germans can have, I think it's 12 CVP, isn't it?
That's right.
Accumulate that, in which case it's an instant German win. Now there is a German mortar on that hill. It's hip at the moment, but you'll see it as soon as it fires. It can fire each of the German prep fire phases, and that gives them 1 CVP victory point. So this is a 6 turn, so potentially the Germans can have 5 CVP from firing that mortar. So if the Americans lose 7 points, they're in danger essentially of losing the game through their CVP cap.
Prisoners don't count is kind of important. That's one thing. And this one has, I mean, it's early days, obviously, for St Mère Église. It's no one's suggesting. But this one has some questions over the difficulty for the American. I'm not going to say unbalanced because I don't like talking about unbalanced scenarios. But I think,
and it's too early to say, isn't it?
Of course. But I'm going to say it looks difficult for the Americans. I think that's the general feeling. We've got a little bit of it's a swinging towards the Germans already. I think it was 6-2, I think, something like that.
Yeah, but interesting, there have been American wins, so it's not it's not undoable by any means.
Exactly.
But you certainly felt a bit on the back foot from the beginning.
Yeah, I think if you look at in terms of the amount of open ground that the Americans have got to get through, and we know that blockages can be a little bit tricky for the defender. In fact, I mean that's the question. But the point here is really that there's a lot of open ground. Now, you've obviously got 2 routes. You can go around the top, and this is obviously the route I chose here, where if you can break through in one area and try and kind of, lurch through. But it obviously looks like an easier task to kind of enter from, the top left and kind of navigate through the village and then through the orchards and up the hill. That certainly feels like a more doable thing. So my approach was I thought that you were going to defend the village and the wood line quite heavily, and you would leave the top a little bit lighter defended, and so therefore I would push hard on the top and see where.
And that's exactly what I've done actually. Right. Yeah, because there's like 12 concealment counters, and the Germans can mostly set up concealed without using those. So there's quite a lot of That was exactly my thought. But there is force.
Yes.
In the top part of the board.
So we're gonna start running through it and see. So straight away, okay. So this is a nice little tip that you actually. This is where you're a very fair player. You can obviously try to grab wall advantage when you move up to a wall or a hedge, And if the opposing side, which has water advantage, can't prove to you it's a real unit, you not only do you reveal it, but you
I don't think you necessarily reveal it, but because I'm in open ground, as I lose wall advantage, I'm in open ground. Obviously, I lose it then. Yeah.
So yeah, okay.
If it was an orchard, I might not. Yeah.
Right, you're exact. So here, I'm able to try and grab concealment. I grab wall advantage and find out.
Yeah.
That you are, in actual fact, a dummy. So that was quite a nice little start to the scenario. Getting rid of those 2 dummy units. And then what I needed here was just some nice. If I'd have got some nice advancing fire shots.
Yeah. Yeah.
And these were not insignificant. I think these were like 8-up-1s and stuff like that. I think something.
Yeah.
So, even 4-up-1s, but couldn't get any real kind of effects. And so the
you rolled my sniper and we didn't.
All right. Didn't do anything. Yeah. So I pushed on. You pull back. There's an awful lot of firepower there. It was like 50 odd firepower or something from from the Americans there. Your mortar starts earning you some points.
Yep.
And you start to pull back.
The thing here is I just don't want to spend any time facing your firepower.
Right.
And that's the big issue for the Germans, I think. But it's because you've chosen to attack all in a group like that. I think people would be tempted to spread out a little bit more. Yeah. But I think this is what makes it, in a way, quite difficult for me to stop you.
Right. And I mean, looking at this now, I think had I had one unit back in like kind of C7, for example, you'd need to keep 1 or 2 back here just to keep me honest on the bottom.
Even if it's just a half squad.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe that's what I needed to do. So I get a little bit lucky there with just the pin on the half squad. Push forward again.
I revealed my hip medium machine gun for a little shot.
Right, yeah, exactly. And again, I get a little bit lucky. Got a nice shot there through the.
I missed that. That was a good call.
Yeah, only during the movement phase you can do that.
Yeah.
You pull back, and that gap here between J1 and I1 here is brutal because you want to be. This is a really nice area to run down here, and if I could get down there, but you had the medium or the light machine gun and a leader. Yeah, and it's just too strong.
I had to pull back. I think I've got virtually. I think I've still got a squad up here. That is a squad, but I haven't got enough force to hold you.
Yeah.
But I can fire from the flanking force. And this is what's going through my mind now, is trying to just corral you into as smaller an area as possible, funnel you into an area that I can seal off.
Right, exactly. You're up to 3 points. You knock a squad and a half squad out. So you fired. I think you fired and knocked
that was through that same gap, wasn't it? I think.
Yeah.
But you killed the squad.
Yeah, I get double 1 and you get double 6. So we're it's always a nice combination to knock out.
Yeah.
And the shame is that the Americans don't get anything for killing Germans, and there's definitely opportunity to knock out a few of them. But I've crossed the road here. This is the big deal. But with effectively 3 turns left. To start to run. Now this is where I go for wall advantage and you don't show me the real unit.
That's right.
So I have to run round and find out that you are actually a dummy.
Yeah.
You break the squads and I'm able to start running into position here. So at this point, I have some guys, with 2 turns to get to that hill.
Yeah. It's certainly still doable.
Yeah, you get a couple more points.
I think I mucked this turn up a little bit in terms of positioning myself.
Yeah, I think so. This was the concern was whether these guys at the back here would get, DM'd again, or if you would be able to do anything. Very much with these guys. You don't DM them because you get your concealment again. So I start now running stuff to get into position. But
you're taking a little bit of proper losses. Yeah.
Yeah, another double 1 there from you. So this is where it starts getting a bit painful. And suddenly you're on 8 points, and you'll get a 9th from your mortar on your next turn.
I need 3 more to win in that method. Yeah. And there's an interesting dilemma now, because you're going to have to run through residual and stuff to get onto the hill.
Yeah.
But you can't afford to lose many to Ks and KIAs. Yeah.
Exactly. Now, the other problem I've got is I've got this broken squad up in L3 that I can't really afford to go back for. And you've got 2 kind of vulture-like squads floating around. And I don't really know about, I'm thinking at this point, if you capture him, I didn't realize at the time that prisoners didn't count, but I thought, maybe you're going to capture him. That'll be 2 points because half squad, and then you'll get another 1 for the mortar. And you're thinking about it here.
I'd really muck this up. This unit is totally wasted.
Yeah, so this is interesting. So what basically happens here, you have wall advantage here in M7, and you want to slide down into N7. And we have to do a bit of rules research, and the Discord guys helped out a little bit as to whether or not you lose wall advantage as part of when you move. But there's a rule elsewhere that basically says as soon as you start moving, as long as you change location, you can spend movement points but not lose it, but smoke and stuff like that, searching weapons. But if you move the location, then you will drop wall advantage. And basically, as soon as you drop it, I gain it as part of the wall advantage rules, and therefore you're now in trouble here. So I'm able to get the shot at you. You go berserk, which is pretty much the worst thing for me because I'm already final fired. So now you're
true, but it's also going to stop me advancing into here, which is where that's where I was trying to get a concealed squad into 07.
Right.
That would have been perfect, but of course losing concealment and everything in open ground.
Exactly. So the berserk. So I have to final protective fire here.
Yeah.
Luckily, I do well. Now you roll your sniper, but you decide to reposition it because you decided it was only going to DM this guy. Here, which I think you didn't want to route away. I think you've got an idea about your concealed guy. So, so you reposition your sniper. You run up. He stays undM'd because your man is concealed and don't lose concealment behind the bocage. So we have a little bit of firing.
Yeah. I really feel like I've cocked up this a lot when I because the unit in P8 is almost useless.
Right.
I suppose he's covering P7 a little bit, but so I guess I managed to restrict your approach to P6.
Right.
Q7. Yeah.
You have an attack against this 3 thing. You've obviously got the ambush roll and everything because you are concealed. So you ambush me and you fail to get me on that one.
Yeah.
So at this point I will be withdrawing next time. So for my last turn, I've got a bit of a dilemma because you obviously only need 3 more points. I know that I'm going to lose some stuff here, and there's another 2 points straight away for that one.
Yeah, you lost the squad, didn't you?
So now 1 more point would do it. And obviously you've got a point sitting here looking fairly doable in this melee. So we start to move the half squad and the leader in here, and
they
we
both
get
fast, don't they?
Yeah, we get to this point here.
That concealed unit is just the leader.
Yes, exactly that. I wasn't aware of that at the time. I could have probably worked it out. So I now have to send guys back to try and help this melee out because we've got some covering squads and bits and pieces.
And then you do the very wise thing of not moving anything else in because you've won this. All you got to do is survive any defensive fire and advance onto the hill.
So you have a final fire shot here, a 4-up-2 against my guys.
Bit of a hallelujah, really.
Yeah, exactly. They're going to win the scenario. You get a double 1. So all I've got to do is pass with this half squad. That's all I've got to do.
Yeah.
So the leader breaks, and will the half squad pass to win the game? He doesn't with an 11, and that's it. There's nothing else going on.
Yeah.
So that's the That's the last.
We did have the. I mean, had you got up there, there was still the possibility of me killing the half squad in close combat, wasn't there?
Exactly. So we decided to sort of play it out to see what would have happened here, just on the off chance that I hadn't have failed that. And we're talking about whether or not I may have moved these guys. I think the danger of moving extra guys in was I just lost on the spot going through the.
Exactly. I think you did the right thing because the odds were definitely in your favour of that squad surviving the 4-2.
Right.
Yeah. Especially with a negative modifier leader with him.
Yeah, exactly. So the close combat. So obviously we've got a -4 because we are broken withdrawing, but we've got another +2 because we've got 2 covering squads. So you have to roll basically a 6 to kill me. And you roll a 7. So in actual fact, I
wouldn't have won that way.
Yeah. So it would have been a thrilling end regardless of what happened. But you did win it. But it was tough, but it wasn't not doable.
Yeah. I think I could have made it a lot harder towards the end. I mean, my basic plan was like having a wall against you, essentially, of units moving along as you advanced, which I sort of did. But it was kind of tricky because because I kind of had to stay out of your line of fire as much as possible. Helped regaining concealment every time with the hedges, the blockage. But I definitely mucked up I think I needed to have moved a bit quicker.
Right.
So I could have covered that little bit of the hill a bit better.
Right.
I mean, that leader would have been fine if he'd have been in Q7.
Right.
Where he was literally, removing access to.
Yes.
In the movement phase to that hex, or making it very difficult for you.
Yeah. And maybe the mortar could have been in, maybe T6 or I don't know G90, something like that, because at least it gets shots in your first fires and stuff.
Yeah.
That you might want to, because obviously this way it was fairly much out of the game.
Yeah.
But it was a good introduction to St Mère Église. It was a nice.
It's a nice short scenario. I mean, it's on the archive as only being just over 2 hours.
Right.
Yeah, I know Indy played it and wants to play it again as the Americans. I think he played it as the Germans, and he wanted to play as the Americans to see to test out that because his game seemed kind of unbalanced. It'd be interesting to see how this develops over time.
Yeah. So if you have played it, if you want to share your game with us, we are happy to take a look and we'll highlight it again. I think it's nice if you guys do want to kind of join in and send someone over. So send us a log file if you want, or just upload it to the archive, and I'll highlight it if we see one go up there with a log file. This one will go up today so that you can download that as well. Other than that, Martin, anything else?
No, I don't think there's anything else. No.
Well, enjoy your holiday.
Thank you.
I'm off to play Guriev's headquarters. Guriev's.
Yeah. And also, you've got a fitness test coming up, haven't you?
Oh, I do. Yeah. For my refereeing, so my next level up on refereeing, I need I need to be able to run something like 2,700 meters in 12 minutes, and I'm terrible at running. So I've had to start running, and it's horrible. But I'm doing that. So 13th of August is my fitness test. At the moment, I cannot do it. Let me tell you, I can do I can do the time. I can't do the distance. So obviously, I'm too slow. But you've been running as well, I hear.
Yeah, I mean, I've never quite stopped being a runner, but I've not been very good. But I'm running with my neighbour at the moment, only a couple of miles, kind of every other day, really, like sort of 2 or 3 times a week. So starting to get a bit more comfortable out running.
Yeah, nice.
Plan is to keep it up while the weather's good.
I check myself on I've got an app that does my weight, so I get on the scales and the app tells me. And the last time I weighed myself, because I was excited about it, was I'd just done the cabbage soup diet, and this is where you literally just eat cabbage soup for a week, and it's it makes the house smell and so it's all a bit grim, but it's really good. I mean, if you want to lose weight, I don't know if you've got a particular boxing match you've got to get down to a certain weight, you will absolutely lose like 8 pounds in a week. I mean, and it all goes back on again. I mean, that's the thing.
That's the problem, isn't it? Yeah.
So I'd lost like 8 pounds, I was really excited about it. I got on the scales. I was like, look, brilliant. And of course, now I've got to get back on the scales again 6 months later after going on this cabbage soup diet, knowing that, well, okay, this isn't going to be good. So even though I've been on a fairly strict diet for the last, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks, it's it's not great, is it? So weight's back up again. You're so disheartened, but there we go.
That's the problem, isn't it?
Yeah, don't weigh yourselves. Right, Martin, have a lovely holiday. Enjoy yourself.
Thank you very much.
We'll be back in a couple of weeks, I guess, if we can squeeze a scenario in before then. And have we got any plans? I think we've got any plans to play anything in particular, so we'll have a look and see.
No.
Maybe we'll highlight Gurev's headquarters. Are you playing this one as well this round?
I'm not at the moment. No, I was expecting somebody to drop out and me to have to take one on, but which may still happen because we haven't got all the games in.
Okay. All right.
But so
maybe we'll highlight that instead. All right then. Well, thank you very much for the game. Well played today, and always good. And hopefully the Dice Tower experiment has proved that it's okay to trust Dice Towers, even if someone looks like they're
maybe even your opponent.
Yeah, but if you can, if people are able to roll dice in a particular way and prove that it's actually possible to cheat a tower, let's send us some, a video. But I want to see a video not cut and stopped and started and everything like that, where you cut out the failures. I want to see one, like a double blind experiment almost. That'd
be interesting to see. If someone thinks they can do it, that'd be interesting to see.
Definitely. Or the way they roll stuff or whatever. I don't know. We'll have a look. Anyway, until then, Martin, thanks very much for your time. And
cheers.
Bye.